All right, hey everybody. This is our first episode of our HNB podcast with Cosmo and Rivkah. And so say hi, Riv.
Hi.
All right, so she's normally not on camera, and she's still not on camera. We're just doing an audio podcast. And so the whole idea behind this, so well, what are you doing on a podcast? What's the podcast about? It's just intended to be more conversational and relational and personal. Every day we have Daily Manna, or when we do our Daily Bites, we're going through passages of Scripture. We're talking about particular, there's an order that we're going in. This is more like if we were we're just having a conversation. And so we're going to be talking about all kinds of things, but we want it to be a little bit spontaneous. So what we've asked everyone to do is for you to send in whatever questions that you may have. What do you want to hear us talk about?
Topics of conversation.
Right. If there are things that
no topic is off limits, but we don't choose what they are. They get pulled out like they're random.
And so I'm going to say, no topic is off limits.
Well, I would say no topic is off limits. So people will send in their questions, and then if something is inappropriate, then you just don't do that question.
Right.
But if you pull something out, like if there's like a thing and then it's random, and then you have, okay, here's your question. But if it's like something super inappropriate, we're like, oh, spin again. Only because it's inappropriate, not because it's something that we're like, I don't feel like talking about that.
Yeah. So that's what we're going to do. So if you have questions about life, about us, about ministry, about
theology,
spirituality, marriage, raising children,
fun.
Sports. Rib knows a lot about sports.
So much.
And she loves to talk about sports.
It's like my thing.
Yeah. So, or the 80s. If you want to talk about the 80s, you've come to the right place. Welcome. And so that's kind of the did I miss anything?
I mean,
so we could talk about spiritual things. If you have biblical, theological questions, look, I don't like to talk about, I don't like to talk about controversial things, but I have opinions. What I don't want is, I just don't want a bunch of people, I don't want a lot of
pushback?
Angry people.
Yeah, but people naturally get angry.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that we have to pay attention to that anger.
Suppose. That's right.
If they are angry with something that we have said, or if they have an opinion, then that can be one of their questions that they send in, and we can answer that then.
So you may or may not agree with everything that we say, and that's all right.
I think lots of
we
people
love
disagree.
You too. All right. So
Antonio is going to draw a question and throw it at us, and that's what unless it's inappropriate, and then we will discuss that. Anything. And we have no problem having conversations. It's probably annoying for most people who are friends with us.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I am going to have to get good at is waiting for you to finish talking before I interject so that it's not chaotic.
This is a beautiful exercise. All right. Give us a question, Antonio.
All right.
How
did God bring the two of you together?
All right. How did God bring the two of us together?
I think some question if it really was God. No, I'm kidding.
No one's ever questioned that. No, right from the
it's such a long
It's a long story. That's okay. So I grew up in Florida, and Riv grew up all over
the world.
Right. In California.
I was born in California, lived in New York, moved to Missouri, moved back to New York, moved to Israel, came visited New York, moved to Missouri, moved to California, moved back to Missouri, married you.
Oh, you moved to Minnesota for a little bit.
Oh, I lived in Minnesota. Yeah, that's true.
Then back to California, then
went to
Missouri.
Greece for several months during the Gulf War. Lived there and went to high school there for a bit.
And I was in a small town in Florida.
With one stoplight.
It was awesome.
And a Piggly Wiggly.
I couldn't wait to get out of there. She wanted to get out of the city and move to the country.
Yeah, I grew up, I was in Jerusalem. The smell of carbon dioxide, it gives me that warm, cuddly feeling that chocolate chip cookies do for some.
That's what cow manure does for me.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
nice.
yeah.
That's nice.
So my dad was a prison chaplain in Central Florida, and then her dad was a minister. Reaching the Jewish people. He started one of the first Messianic congregations in Southern California in 1973, and so she was born into that.
Yeah, I was raised in Messianic ministry. It's what I knew. It's what I've always known. What was weird is when we got married and we were in church ministry.
Yeah.
That was strange for me. But I think that was a learning exercise the Lord was showing me about the other side of things.
Right. So one of the interesting things kind of about the Lord fitting us together is this unique background where Riv's family isn't Jewish in a DNA way, but she grew up like immersed in.
Well, I didn't know I wasn't Jewish until I was 12.
Right.
So
when I thought you were 12 or you were
12 or 13, one of those two.
And so now
was I 13 and you 12?
We were both 13, I thought.
Okay, we were both 13. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah. So she found out she wasn't Jewish. She just assumed she was Jewish when she was 13.
How would I have known any different?
Right. And I grew up, so my father came from Italy. His mother was Jewish, his father wasn't. And when my dad gave his life to the Lord in 1961, he was expelled from his home, and then eventually he led his family to the Lord. But I grew up my dad, we were in the Assemblies of God and grew up in small Assembly of God churches in Central Florida, and didn't find out till I was 13 that we were Jewish. Now, my dad was born in 1941 in a small town in southern Italy. So he was born there during World War II. And so he was told by his mother at a very young age not to tell anyone that they're Jewish because it was dangerous. So my dad takes me into his study at the house when I was 13, and he says, hey, son, I'm going to tell you something, but don't ever tell anybody. And I was like, okay. And he was like, we're Jewish, and but for your own protection, don't tell people. Keep that to your safe. We're in the safest place in the world to be Jews here in America, but the persecution always returns.
Yeah, I've thought of that a lot, how he was really real strong about that opinion, considering how much anti-Semitism is now growing in the country, and so it starts to feel dangerous again. Yeah.
So and I was 13, and I was like,
I don't think you cared.
I didn't know what to do with it. I was okay. Like, this doesn't. I mean, yeah, we did little thing. He took me to Passover Seders, but it wasn't part of my upbringing. It didn't change anything for me. It was central to Rivkah's upbringing. So here she was. Here I am, Jewish, growing up in the church, and I understand church. I know all the hymns and all of this, but I have not a real deep understanding of our Jewish background. Whereas Riv, she didn't know any of the hymns. But she still doesn't.
Yeah, I really they sound pretty.
Yeah,
and I like to read them. I mean, I love to listen to them. I just don't know the words, and all the words,
all the verses.
Yeah,
yeah. So here, she's not Jewish, but she was raised in a Jewish world, and I'm Jewish, raised in a Christian world, and the Lord put us together. So there's an understanding of where the other comes from in
yeah, I mean,
unique way.
I grew up in, I was born, my parents were already in Messianic ministry, and they were already congregational leaders in LA. And so then we moved to New York, and they pioneered in New York. And all I ever knew, I mean, when we did Christmas, it's not that we didn't do Christmas, it was just 2 days. We would go and get a tree maybe 2 days before Christmas, and then it came down the day after Christmas, until we moved to Israel.
Right.
Once we moved to Israel, Christmas was a thing.
Right.
And so that was fun for me because it had never been a thing before. I mean, we, of course, acknowledged it, and there was nothing wrong with it. It's just that in being in Jewish ministry in the 80s, you're dealing with a lot of Jewish people that would find it very difficult, especially since we were only 40 years past the World War II.
And what was the attitude toward it in Israel? toward
They thought
Christmas.
it was great. It was like in the movies, and they gave away free Christmas trees because their whole economy is tourism, and their whole touristic is to Christians. So they didn't have a problem with it. They don't care. I mean, the tour guides on the buses know the Bible forwards and backwards. It's not something I never picked up that they felt threatened by Christians doing Christian things.
Right.
It's when Jews started feeling the pressure to do Christian things that might make them feel uncomfortable. But we would get a free tree every year, and they were really interesting. But
one year you have to like tie a top and a bottom.
Yeah, we
of the
opened
tree
it up because
together.
they'd be all tied up and stacked in these piles, and you would go and you would pick yours up, and we got home and we untied it, and we had the bottom half of a tree. So I think my dad went and got like another one, and we tied them together, and then we cut some of the branches on the bottom and used them like filler on the top, something like that. It was a real, like old-fashioned-y kind of Christmas.
Right.
But the neighbors were all super excited, and we once had all our neighbors over, and my dad printed out all the Christmas carols in Hebrew and in English, so they knew what we were singing about, and it was all Jesus centered, and they thought it was really neat. They loved the Christmas tree. They were like, "Oh my gosh, it's like the movies," because they see it in the movies. They see
Right.
it on American television. And so it was a lot of fun. So when I was a kid, of course I knew the year and where we were in the year based on the Jewish holidays. And so, Passover was my favorite holiday because it was the biggest, and we'd go to these, inns. Like it was the Windmill Inn, but it was more like a banquet hall in
Sure.
a restaurant kind of a thing. And all the kids would play together, and everybody had their little Seder plates, and then we all ate together. It was tons of fun.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that I wasn't Jewish until I was on a youth. We had our youth group, and we were doing something because most of the kids that came to the congregation were Jewish. Like in our youth group, I can't think of anyone that actually wasn't Jewish.
Other than you and your brothers.
But I didn't know that.
Right.
I didn't know we weren't Jewish, and so we were talking, and I don't remember what I was saying or what I was doing, but this individual, they didn't mean to be damaging, but it really affected me for like
A long time.
a really long time. But I was talking or whatever, and the person just really snapped at me harshly and just said, "Rivkah, you're not Jewish." And it was so stunning. I was like, "Wait, what?" And I just didn't know.
If you've, obviously most of you have seen Rivkah. If you've seen her, she's beautiful, by the way.
Okay, that's not what this podcast is about.
Well, it's about how we met, which, by the way.
Okay, keep going.
So, but she's got dark hair and dark eyes, and she's got the name Rivkah.
I used to joke that I was going to write a book and say, "My name is Rivkah and I'm not Jewish. You live my life and turn out normal."
Right.
Because everyone just assumed I was.
So when they moved to Israel when she was 14, and she introducing herself, "Hi, my name's Rivkah," the assumption was you're Jewish. They almost felt like by telling her name to them and looking like she looked, she was lying to them, deceiving them.
Right. So when people found out that I wasn't, because I didn't walk around going, "I'm not Jewish, I'm not Jewish." I just said my name and I made friends. But when people found out I wasn't, they did feel like I had sort of deceived them. But that was never my intent. And internally, I really felt Jewish.
Right,
I
it was
never
your
didn't
whole-
feel Jewish, and which is why when I came back from the United States after living in Israel until I was 19, I had to make a decision, and I had to discover, was my value based in me being Jewish or not Jewish, or was my value based in who God created me to be?
Yeah.
And my value and my worth, there was nothing less about me because I was Greek and English and Welsh and French Canadian and all that. That was, so I learned, the Lord walked me through that to where I was proud of who I was.
Right.
And
that's like, and we'll tell our story here in a second, but it's one of those things where, when I talked to, they felt deceived by you telling them your name. And so one of the things that when I talk to someone who's not Jewish and they ask me if I'm Jewish, one of the things I always try to do is be authentic and honest with them. And I'll say, I'm Jewish genetically, but I wasn't raised, like when you think Jewish, you may have a different, I was raised in church. My dad became a believer in Jesus and Yeshua, before I was born. And so I don't want you to have different assumptions that maybe we were raised the same way.
I understand what you said, like when you do that, and I understand why you do that, because it helps you feel more authentic. But I don't think that most people realize that how many Jewish people are around them, and they are not the stereotype that people think they are. How many people are like, I don't even know anyone Jewish. And I'm like, I bet you know tons of people that are Jewish. They're just not telling you they're Jewish.
Well, the key for me, I guess, in that is I don't ever want someone that I'm wanting to lead them to freedom and life and to truth. And so I don't ever want them to feel that I tricked them. So by laying that out there, then we can just go forward, and it's never been a problem.
Growing up in Jewish ministry, though, there were plenty of people that discovered they were Jewish later in life, and no one was like, well, you're not really Jewish because you were like 30 when you found out. There was no discussion like that. It was just, hi, my name is such and such, and if they're like, are you Jewish? And you're like, yeah, that's it. That's the end of it.
But like, I remember here, like I was, at one time we were here in Surprise. We live in Surprise, Arizona, and we were here, and I went to meet, I had met this Jewish couple, and then they wanted to have breakfast with me, and I go, and I meet them at like Denny's, and when I get there, there's like 10, they've got 10 of their friends, all these senior citizens from Sun City, and so they're like, anyway, that's not the story today, but I sit down with them, and as I'm talking to them, they're like, so you're Jewish? And so I said that very briefly, and so then a lot of times, Jews feel that other Jews that believe in Yeshua have somehow, in the past, these older generations have felt like they betrayed their people in doing that. And so, knowing that I had been raised to believe in Yeshua, they gave me more. They didn't see that somehow I had betrayed my people in that regard, and it allowed for a really good conversation, and really,
their children,
the defenses didn't go up.
Well, their children were married to Gentiles and celebrated Christmas.
That's true.
I mean, they just don't care. You know what I mean? Like they don't. If someone is going to be open to the gospel, as a Jewish person, what is it, like 90% of Jewish people that get saved go to church.
Right.
So it's not an issue of that level of betrayal or understanding or. I mean, of course, it's out there. Sure, you have different types of Jewish people. So you have atheist Jews, you have secular Jews that go on, like Easter and Christmas Christians do, and then you have people that are more Orthodox. But typically, the people who are more Orthodox, like, they're not interested because they have what they have, and it's intentional.
Right.
So those people that are interested in listening, because you've met with those people that you're talking about for forever
for
now.
Years now.
Years and years. And they're not interested in the gospel.
Yeah, I mean, we still meet, but
right, yeah, you do. You have conversations, and they love
praying
to talk
that
about,
one of these days that
but
door
they
will
have
open.
they have. So for those people who are not who are not in Judaism, or they've left Judaism, being Jewish is, I mean, that when a lot of Jewish people are Buddhists, a lot of Jewish people,
Jubus, they call them.
Right. They're not like, well, I don't know, if the person who I talk to about this isn't Jewish, then I don't know if I'm interested in what they have to say.
Well, yeah.
They're looking for more.
Well, historically, though, there's been, and for a number of reasons,
historically,
there's been more
But
animosity
I'm
toward.
talking about like right now.
Yeah. So 1996. It's 1996. The summer of 96, and I've torn.
So long ago.
And I've just graduated Southeastern University in Florida, and I'm moving to Springfield, Missouri, to go to AGTS. And I get to Springfield, and at the same time, what I don't know is just at the very same time, Rivkah has moved to Springfield from California because her dad is now going to be what they call the missionary in residence professor at the Assemblies of God Theological Seminary for this year. And so it turns out that's where I'm going. I've gotten to Springfield to go to school there. I've torn my ACL that summer, so I'm in crutches. I get to Springfield, have surgery. And so when Riv's dad first met me, when Dr. Gannon first met me, I was on crutches. And he actually later told this story that, what did he say to you? That when he saw me in the elevator on the crutches?
He said that he was just impressed by the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
Something about, he didn't know what it was about you, but
Right.
it was something.
right. That there was something that, and so, so that November of '96, there was a big revival going on down in Brownsville, Florida. And so we at the school, I mean, there's apparently a big one going on right now in Asbury,
It's on the
Asbury
8th day, I
University.
think.
But this had been going on for years. And so as a theological seminary, the school put together a trip for all of us to go down to Florida. Like we rented a bus, and we all went down. And so I go down, and Rivkah's mom was actually on that trip. She just apparently she just heard this kid in the back that just wouldn't stop talking the whole trip. I think that was me. And so we get back from that trip, and then one day we're going to we come out of class that morning, and I'm walking to go to chapel with my friend. And we get to the chapel, and they say, hey, today we're actually doing an extended chapel to talk about this, the trip to Brownsville and talk about the revival and what we all experienced there. And so you can go and get your food, and we're going to eat in chapel today and discuss this. So I was like, okay. So my friend Sobi and I headed toward his apartment, which was right next to the school, to grab some food. And as we're walking, there's this entourage of people that I see coming. And right in the middle is the most beautiful girl. And it's November now. I've been here since August, and nobody had really caught my attention. And all of a sudden I see this girl, and I didn't see anybody else. I don't know who else she was walking with at the moment. I didn't see any of them. I just saw her. And we walk past, and my friend Sobi and I look at each other. We're like, who was that? And so when we get back, we go get the food. We come back, and she's standing outside the chapel. And so I was like, so I walk up to her and said, we can eat. Because she's standing outside eating, and I'm like, you can eat inside. And she's like, oh no, I'm fine. I'm fine eating out here. And so I know she doesn't go to school here. I would have known by now if she went to school here. And so I said to her, I'm like, do you go here? And she's like, no, my dad's a professor here. Dr. Gannon's my dad. And I was like, oh, wow. And so I said, well, and so that I was like, well, we're going to go on in, but you can come in. She's like, no, I'm fine. So that was on a Tuesday. And then a couple days later, we had the student government at AGTS put together a soup day, and so they where we all ate together. Well, that day it was International Foods Day, and as we walk in to eat, my friend Sobi, his name's Matthew, but he's from India, and his house name was Sobi. And he looks and he goes, hey, there's Dr. Gannon's wife. Now, see, apparently he saw the whole entourage. I didn't see the whole entourage. I wouldn't have recognized her from anyone because I didn't see anyone but Riv. And so he goes, there's Dr. Gannon's wife. And I go, hey, let's sit by her. So maybe his daughter will show up. And so we go and we sit down, and I'm talking to her. And then Rivkah comes in and sits across from me. And it was like, I was pretty excited. And so we're talking and talking about all kinds of things. I find out at the time I hadn't killed sports for her yet, so she liked sports. The Yankees had just won the World Series, and we were talking about the World Series, and she was a 49ers fan, and she was hilarious and beautiful, and I just was smitten. I don't think I left any impression on her, however.
I do remember you talking about what you wanted to name your son one day.
Yeah.
Right. So I had no choice there.
But here's what she was what was so cool though. She said, because at this point I go by Cosmo. My name growing up, I'm Johnny Cosmo Panzetta Jr. I've always been Johnny, but I get to AGTS and I'm 21 years old, and all these people they feel way older. Because they're in their 40s, which now is not actually that old. And so I felt uncomfortable correcting them when they called me John, so I switched to my middle name, Cosmo. So she said, so Cosmo's an unusual name. And I went, well, actually, my name's John Cosmo. I'm like, it's my dad came from Italy. His name's Giovanni, but he changed it to John. I said, can you imagine if I would have grown up with the name Giovanni, what that would have done for me? And she goes, I don't know about you, but I think about a guy walking around with the name Giovanni, and I just think girls. And I was like, man, that exactly like I would have.
Yeah, and that was Giovanni, total magnet for girls.
Right, no, right? It turns out that did.
He was the coolest, smoothest dude.
But he got the one.
He did.
He got the one. Just got married.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, so that's what she remembers about me. So as we're leaving, I leave, and there I see her, and my friend said, hey, you should invite her to hang out with all of us, because we had a group of guys and girls that hung out, and so, but there she's standing, and she's next to her dad and the vice president of academic affairs and the president of the seminary, and I was like, I'm not walking up there to ask her to hang out with us. And so I missed my opportunity, and so that was November. I remember when I got home, went back to Florida, and then when I wrote in my journal as New Year 97 was beginning, I mentioned that I had met this one girl named Rivkah, and that was about all I wrote, because she had really left an impression on me. But January began, and I didn't see her again, and I couldn't get her face out of my mind. And so there was this other girl that I started seeing from one of the local colleges, and she was a nice girl, but there was not a lot really there. And suddenly, skip ahead to March. It's March, and late March, and I'm hanging out with my friends, and my friend Ed comes in the room, and he says, hey, tomorrow morning there's no class. Dr. Gannon doesn't have any class tomorrow morning. It was like a 7:30 a.m. class, and I was like, what do you mean he doesn't have a class tomorrow morning? How do you know that? And he said, well, his son actually just called me and told me there's no class. And I go, hey, maybe his daughter called me. So I'm driving home that night, and I get to my little apartment. It's a basement apartment, and I go down and I check my answering machine, and it's my mother. And my mother says, Johnny, you got a call from a Rivkah Gannon telling you that there's no class tomorrow? And I thought, she called my mother? What in the world? She called my house in Florida? That's weird. So so you want to tell about that?
Well, my dad had given me a list, and I needed to make the phone calls. So
He had split it, right, between you and your brother.
yes, he had split it. Thank you. So my father had given me a list, and he split it between me and my brother because he wasn't feeling well. He wasn't going to be there, and so I was calling everybody. And I looked at this phone number, and it wasn't working. I kept dialing it. It wasn't working. And then being an international person, I know what a prefix is. It's how he dialed all numbers.
An area code is what the Americans call it.
Oh, an area code. Okay. Excuse me. But anyways, unless you're in the United States, anywhere you call, you pretty much have to use one. And so, but for whatever reason, I had a blank moment, and I didn't know what those three little numbers were. And I thought to myself, well, maybe this will make the number work. And so I called, and this lady answered the phone, and she sounded very happy and nice and cheery. And she said, hello. And I said, hello, my name is Rivkah Gannon. I'm calling for John Panzetta, because that's the name that was legally on the piece of paper.
Right.
So I said, I'm calling for John Panzetta. I'm just calling to let you know that there's no class tomorrow. And she said, oh, are you calling for my husband? Does he have a meeting with your dad? And I said, no. I'm just calling to let you know there's no classes tomorrow. And she was confused, and I was confused. And then she said, oh, wait, you're calling for my son. He goes by Cosmo. And at that point, I realized, she told me, oh, you called his home in Florida. And I felt really stupid, because I had called Florida intending to just call students in the local area. And I was talking to this woman who was clearly the mother of the student that I called. And so I felt really kind of dumb. But she said, yeah, everybody there calls him Cosmo. And she goes, he knows you. And I said, no, he doesn't. And she said, no, yeah, he knows you. And I said, no, because for the life of me, I could not remember anybody that she was talking about. And she said, no, he goes by Cosmo there. She's like, Cosmo. Everybody there calls him Cosmo. And I sat there for a second, and I vaguely remembered this little Italian dude talking to me at the seminary about the name Giovanni. And I was like, okay, yeah. And now I remember. And she said, yeah, he thinks you're so beautiful. And that stopped me for a sec. And I was like, and it was awkward for me. Not for her. Now that I know her as well as I do, it was totally not awkward for her.
Right.
But she's like, yeah, he thinks you're so beautiful. And so I just said, okay, well, if he has any questions and he would like to know what's going on with it, if you could just let him know that there's no class tomorrow. And she's like, okay, because that's just how Joanne is. Sure, okay, yeah, no problem. And and so then when I got off the phone, though, I remember hearing the Holy Spirit say to me, this is the one. Or I got off and I thought, just that's the dumbest thing ever. And I heard the Holy Spirit say, this is the one. And then I thought, that's the dumbest thought I've ever had. And so then I went to my dad and I said, hey. So and I told him what I had accidentally done or whatever. And I said, I accidentally called this guy's mom. And he's like, that's okay. Yeah, no problem. He's like, he's a really nice guy. He's funny. He's this. And I'm like, okay. And he said, you should come to the seminary and meet him. I was like, no. He's like, come on, you should come. You should come to the seminary. And I said, what am I supposed to do? Walk around the seminary with a big sign that's like, hi, I'm single. I'm looking for a husband, which I wasn't looking for a husband. But, I mean, it'd been nice if God sent the right one. But I wasn't like out there, thumbing, like hitchhiking, looking to be picked up by a man. Thank God. And so anyways, and so I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. So, but I had started working for my dad to score and help him grade papers. And so I was going to the seminary and I was working in the library, working on stuff. So,
yeah. So then, like a week later, I have this class, Dr. Gannon, in the morning. And when I walk out of the class, I'm standing in the hallway and I'm talking. There's a group of us guys that are in our early 20s that hung out a lot. And so we're talking and everything. And my friend Mark comes up to me and he goes, hey, don't turn around now. He said, but Rivkah's here. So now I know she's here. So now I'm cognizant of that. And I do the thing where I'm going to pretend that I don't know and I'm going to accidentally see her. So now I'm really, really yucking it up. And apparently she notices that. Every
girl notices when a guy notices them, but is pretending not to notice them.
Right. And I didn't know that because
you're a guy.
I'm a guy.
Okay.
So I'm yucking it up. And by the time I turn around.
Well, I thought in that moment, I saw what was happening. You were like, ha, 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 with your friends. And I was just like, I just watched and I was like, okay, whatever. And I turned around and I left.
So I turn around and she's gone. Right. So then I go home. And I'm in my little apartment, and I would study I'm sitting on a lawn chair. I'm reading a book called Two Worlds by Odin. I still remember it vividly. And
the things you remember.
Yeah, these little details, they're etched in my memory. Like when she says she couldn't remember me, I could close my eyes after I'd met her that one time in November. I could close my eyes and see her face. I could see her smile, and no one had ever left that kind of impression on me. And so I'm sitting here, and I have a lawn chair in the middle of my little living room that I sat on, and I would study. And my friend Mark calls me because he and I worked in the library, but I was off that day. And he calls me, and he's like, hey, what are you doing? And I'm like, studying. He's like, well, good thing you're not studying here. And I was like, why? And he's like, because you'd be distracted. And I said, is Rivkah there? And he said, yep. And I said, man, I'll be there in 5 minutes. And so I got in my car and I went to the library. I never studied in the library because I couldn't get anything done in the library. I would just walk past table after table and just talk to people at each table. And so I never went there. It was the most inefficient, unproductive place for me to study. But I was going on this day. So as I'm driving there, though, I'm thinking to myself, I'm trying to think how I'm going to start a conversation. How am I going to, what am I going to say to her to start the conversation? And then I thought, you know what? It is weird she called my mom. That's a strange thing. And so I can start with that. You called my mom because I know that. And so I go in there. Mark shows me where she is. So I turn the corner, and as I look at her, she looks up at me.
Well, do I get a second?
Yeah.
Okay.
I love you.
So, yeah, I love you too. You're just like, you're like, no, I want you to tell your side. And then you just keep going. And so anyway, so then when I was going to the seminary with my dad, I was like, well, what happens if he comes up and he talks to me or whatever? I'm like, that's really weird. It's really awkward. And he said, well, you can just say, hey, I talked to your mom. And I was like, well, okay, sure. But I knew that he thought I was beautiful and he didn't know anything about me. So that did give me the upper hand. Right. So anyway, so we went in.
Yeah, so I turned the corner to say, hey, and I'm going to see her by accident, which I know she's there. And so my opening line is going to be, hey, you talked to my mom. But instead, she looks up at me and says, hey.
I talked to your mom.
And I was like, yeah. And so now I'm sitting down. I sit down and she says, I sit down across from her at the table.
No, you were still standing. It was instantaneous. You immediately became uncomfortable because I had totally stolen your line. You did not know what to say. You were verbally stumped, which is big for you. And so you couldn't.
Can you tell we've been married 25 years now? Right?
Yeah. And so you were like, and I sat there because I saw it on your face, and I thought it was funny because a girl knows when a guy's trying.
Right.
And so you're like, yeah. And so then you said to me, because you didn't know what to say at that point. So then you're like, oh, yeah. I told her, I talked to her about you because I told her you had this really cool name.
Yeah.
And I was like, really? Okay. Because I knew why he had talked to his mom, and I knew he thought I was beautiful. So he was just making it about, because you thought to yourself, why in the world would I have talked to my mom about her? So you had to come up with
how would she know that, like, yeah, how do I explain that she talked to my mom? I was
that you talked to your
that
mom
I talked to my mom
me.
about her. How would I explain that? So I quickly was like, yeah. I told her I met this girl with the most unusual name. Her name's Rivkah, and so
and
here's.
I just went, oh, okay, all right.
And she's sitting here. I had no idea, which it's no surprise to me, but I had no idea that my mother had let the cat out of the bag.
Yeah, your mom is awesome. She was awesome. She was like a wealth of information.
Yeah, she just offer it all up.
Yeah, you were like, you didn't even have to throw that bucket down that well. It just came right on
Yeah,
up.
she's like, he thinks you're beautiful. Well, I'm thankful in retrospect that she did she did say that, but I would have been mortified in the moment had I known that because
Well, so anyway,
so we talked for a little bit, but then I had to keep up the facade that I was there to study. So I was
grading papers.
Yeah, so I went and sat at another table, and so then the next day I'm working in the library, and here she walks into the library, and I go, oh, you're here again, and she said,
yep, I'll be here. No,
Yeah?
that's not what happened.
What?
That's not what happened. The reason I said that is because you guys were up, you were working.
I was working.
You,
and
Mark, and Ed.
No, not Ed. Another
not
guy.
Ed.
It was another guy, redhead guy.
All right. So you and Mark were out there studying, running the counter for the library.
Yeah.
And I know that you're there, and I know that you're into me. But I'm sitting there ignoring you. So I was finishing grading the papers, and so you had not come over and talked to me or anything like that, which is fine. But I bring up the papers and I give you guys your grades, your paper.
That's right.
I give you guys your papers, and you're like, hey, so you're here again today. And I looked at you and I said, yep, I'll be here every day.
Oh,
and I walked away.
Oh, man. That was music. That was music to my ears. So that meant if she was going to
Not anymore, though. I think if I said to you now, yep, I'll be here every day, you'd be like, what? Why? What did I do?
That's not true. So now, like I said, I was only in the library if I was there to work. I didn't study in the library because I was not efficient there. But now if she's going to be there every day, guess who else is going to be there every day? I'm going to be there every day.
And that's when his grades began to plummet.
They did not plummet. And so the next day I come in and she's sitting at a table with this.
Don't use names.
I'm not going to say her name.
All right.
Anyway, this girl. that I was like, this girl will never stop. I'll never get a window to get over there and talk to her, and so I
That's probably what every guy felt like when you were sitting down talking to me.
Yeah, that's right. And that was their frustration. They never got a shot, and so finally, so and so left, and I was like, breathing room. So I go over and I sit at Riv's table, and I'm like, I'm like, I just need a study break. And she's there studying as well.
Because I'm taking my scuba diving exam.
Right. So she's taking her scuba diving exam. So I said, what are you studying? And she tells me.
Scuba diving.
Right. And so you can tell this part.
So I'm sitting there and I'm studying because my intention was to travel, and I loved the ocean and I love dolphins, and I wanted to do something where I could scuba dive, work with dolphins, whatever. I just didn't want to live in a city. Like, I just wanted to be someplace near the ocean, or if I couldn't do the ocean, then I was going to do like a horse ranch, like just not the city. And I had grown up going to the Greek islands, and Israel's coastal. And so, anyway, so I was taking my scuba diving exam, and you came and you sat down and you said, what are you studying? And I said, oh, I'm studying scuba diving. And you looked at me and you said, oh, no, I could never do that, which I thought was really interesting, because most guys, at least when they were talking to me, were all about boasting themselves up. Or is that how you say it? Boasting?
Building, puffing up. Yeah.
Puffing up. You know, they're like, oh, yeah, me and my car, and me and oh, yeah, I do this. And so he says to me, oh, I could never do that. And I was like, really? Why? And he just says, which I thought was very funny. He looks at me and he says, well, I'm afraid of big fish. And I just started laughing. I thought it was hysterical, because how could someone be afraid of fish?
I was like, I said, if I'm in the water and even a little fish brushes by me, I think I would freeze up.
Like, you go to the beach.
Correct.
You know?
But I'm terrified of the fish. I don't want the fish to touch me.
You're like a walking argument.
Well, but I would stay in the place where we're just the little minnows. I don't go to the deep in the ocean. That's not, if my feet can't touch the ground, I'm not there. So
you're definitely in the shallow end. I'm
definitely in the shallow end. Absolutely. Yeah. Ha ha ha. I'm definitely in the shallow. There's no way. It's so, I hate it. When we were,
anyways, that's that. And you were like, oh, and so we started talking about that. And then he had to go, and his great line, his fabulous line was, hey, we should do lunch. We have great conversations. And that was so smooth. But it instantly made me a little uncomfortable. So I immediately looked at my watch, which was not there.
It was a bad sign. Like, when you say, hey, maybe we could go out for lunch sometime. We have really great conversations. And, I'm like, and she looks down at her wrist that has no watch on it. This is not a good sign.
But the only reason I got uncomfortable is because I actually had a date with somebody else. But nobody from the seminary. And so I was kind of seeing this guy, but I was like dating around, you know. And so I was trying to figure out how to either get out of that date or move that date or whatever. And so I didn't want to do dinner because I didn't know you hardly at all. So I said, sure. I think it was going to be after the Easter break that we went on our first date.
That's exactly right.
Right, because then that was because you were going away.
Yeah. So she gave me her phone number, and 417-886-7374. It's out of commission now.
It's amazing what you can remember, and it's amazing what you forget.
Yeah. So that weekend I was going, my friend Mark, his dad was a pastor in Wichita, and he's actually the pastor at that church in Wichita now. And so we were going that weekend to his parents' house, to his family's house. And so while we're there, I had her phone number, so I was going to call to line up when we were going to go out. And so I call her house, and her mom answers the phone, and her mom says, and I'm like, I asked for Rivkah, and she said, well, she's not here, but she goes, it's after 9 o'clock, and normally she's not allowed to receive calls after 9 o'clock.
Okay, so this is the old days, right, where you have the one landline.
Yeah.
And so even when we were in full-time ministry in New York, before Israel, before cell phones, my dad had this rule. You don't call our house before after 9 o'clock unless it's an emergency, which is good because then people get like good night's sleep. So, you know, as a teenager, it was annoying. As a young adult, it was annoying. But as an adult, I think my father was a genius.
Yeah. I grew up with a bit of anarchy where I could go to sleep.
Yes. We grew up in completely different
I could go to sleep when I wanted. Culturally. Once I was a teenager.
There was hardly any parenting that went on. Like, they were there to make sure you're food, clothed, and safe.
Oh, no, they did.
And then
great.
you lived your life, and your mom was like, you're the best all the time.
She was awesome.
Yeah, she was great. She was great. She was your mom.
Yeah.
And so, but in my world, we had structure.
Right. So here's the deal. So
safety.
So her mom's telling me, like, so this is weird for me because she's 23 and I'm 22. Or
I'm not
20, you're
23.
22 and you're
22.
almost 23.
That's right.
So I'm 21. She's almost 22, and
But it was their house.
I get it, but I didn't mentally still get it at the time. So I was young and came from a different background. So it was weird to me. But her mom said normally she can't receive calls after 9, but her dad is out of town. He was in North Carolina teaching, and so.
So while the master's away, we can play.
So she said, so you can call back. She's over with her friends now, but you can call back at 10 or something like that. So I call back.
So when I got, because back then, no cell phones. Like, there's no way of getting a hold of me.
No.
I just get home whenever I get home.
Right. And we start talking, and we're a solid hour on the phone. I'm using my parents' calling card.
I don't know if anybody can tell, but we never have a hard time you'd been watching A Few Good Men with your friends. And oh, that's right.
Yeah.
I was with Amy Hayburn.
Great movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we're going to have to probably split this into 2 parts, I think.
I think anything we do is going to have to be split.
I mean, maybe nobody cares about all these little details, but you asked the question, Antonio.
How's Antonio's face doing?
Huh? He's all right.
It is 3:11.
Okay. So
we could just pick up at a different time.
Yeah.
It'd be the road to engagement.
The road to engagement. So
you can do it however.
So I call her and we're talking and it's funny. Like her
because I'm talking a lot, my mother is becoming anxious.
Yeah.
Because she doesn't trust that I say all the right things. Right. Because probably, I understand that now as a mom of 5 kids, 2 adults, and then an older teenager and younger kids. Like, you just never know what they're going to say.
Right.
And there were things about me that I'm sure she would have loved to have kept under wraps. And so she came into the room and she's like, hey. And I was like, what? And she's like, don't tell him all your dirty laundry. And I was like, oh, okay. So she leaves my room and he goes, what'd she say? And I said, oh, she told me not to share all my dirty laundry.
Yeah. So we're talking and then she goes, and again, I'm using a calling card because it's when you had long distance calls.
That's right. Because in my mind, I think I should be in my room, but I'm not. I'm in my dad's office because that's where the phone is.
Ah, okay. So yeah, so so she goes, wow, we've been on the phone for like an hour. This is going to get expensive. So I think that she's kindly releasing me, saying goodbye so that she can get off this long phone call. And she goes, this is going to get expensive. She goes, we should hang up and I should call you back so that we basically split the bill, which was really, really thoughtful. But it was super encouraging to me too.
I will say, I never paid that bill. My dad paid that bill.
Undoubtedly,
so
I didn't pay mine.
So generous of me. I was just thinking of,
That's
hey,
fine.
My daddy can fit the bill.
But you were being thoughtful toward even my parents because they were paying for mine.
Oh well, yeah.
Yeah, it's their calling card, and so, but
you should thank my dad though.
I have.
Because of him.
I'll thank him again.
There you go.
So that's the thing is, when now it's not that she's just trying to, when someone's trying to get out of a conversation, she's not. She's actually enjoying it enough that she wants to call back. So this is highly encouraging.
I felt pushed, not by you. No. I felt pushed by the Holy Spirit.
Oh, okay.
It was like that, not by you.
Oh.
You don't push me. But I felt pushed by the Holy Spirit to keep moving forward.
Right.
It wasn't I think for you it was like butterflies and rainbows. And for me it was more like just keep moving forward.
Yeah, I wouldn't classify it as butterflies and rainbows, but fireworks.
You were skipping.
Fireworks. It certainly was fireworks, but not butterflies and rainbows. That doesn't
But we can pause there and
go to our first date.
Yeah, next time.
Because our first date was on Tuesday, April the 1st.
Yeah, April Fool's Day. Perfect.
1997.
Yeah, that's how my life rolls.
Yeah. I remember it was such a great day. I thought, please, Lord, don't let this be an April Fool's joke.
Yep.
Yeah, it was great. All right. Well, so that's the beginning of us kind of.
That's our meeting.
Yeah.
And then it's like what Antonio says. The next part will be the road to engagement, which is the road lasted 5 minutes.
So the question is, have we lost all our viewership now, or our listenership?
No one has to listen.
Yeah.
You'll listen.
Yeah.
You'll put it on
No, that's not true. I struggle to listen to myself.
If
I
your
don't
mom were still around,
my,
she'd listen.
undoubtedly. My voice in my head, for all of us, it sounds different than it sounds outwardly. And whenever I hear myself, it drives me crazy how high and nasally my voice is.
Yeah, that must be hard.
Yeah, it is. All right. Well, I think that's it for now.
And we'll do next time. We'll do the rest.
So hey, and so make sure that you send in if you have any questions, things that you want to have discussed. We want to be able to do that, and so you can send an email with the questions to podcast@shalomaz.com, podcast@shalomaz.com, or you can actually send a text message as well. And so that text message number is 602-903-6565. 602-903-6565. And you can text any questions that you have, and then those will get thrown at us in the future randomly, and we'll hit them as much as we can, as much as we're able to.
All right.
All right. Hey, thanks so much.
Thank you. Mazel mazel.
Shalom, shalom. Have a beautiful day.